Welcome to the weekly Woodcast with Dennis and Michael Woodworth, and we have two very special guests here this evening on a Saturday evening to talk something that, without question, is what I'm most passionate about in the world, and that is baseball. Welcome this evening, Barry Gillis, past president of Baseball Nova Scotia and a baseball enthusiast his whole life, probably one of the most well-read people I've ever met, and has been one of my closest friends for a very long time. And we have on the line tonight, all the way from the US of A, Boston Red Sox Hall of Famer, Bill Spaceman Lee on the line. How you doing, Bill?
I'm doing great. I can actually, like Sarah Palin, I can see Nova Scotia from my window.
So can I.
So tonight,
Tonight
we're going to talk baseball the whole time, and really what the main objective tonight is to tell some stories about some incredible baseball players, moments, and history of the game, because I find a lot of our players today that have come through the system really don't have the type of knowledge base they have to have on what came before them. And you can see tonight Barry's brought some encyclopedias of baseball that literally would have taken, I don't know how much time, Barry, but an enormous amount of time to learn about the game. And Bill, of course, you played within that game, so you have a lot of stories that you'll be able to share with the audience tonight. And we're going to do some things, and if Bill agrees with it, I hope he does. I'm going to put him on the spot, but we're going to ask people on Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube channel to make their selections tonight of the Major League Baseball greatest players of all time by position. So pitchers, catchers, position players, and a closer, and as well as a middle relief pitcher that we would consider the sixth pitcher in a lineup, so that if one of your players get hurt, that you can move in. And, of course, last but not least, what came into the game in the 1970s was a DH. So you'll probably find our selections, whether it's Barry, myself, or Bill, we'll pick one of the best hitters of all time that didn't play much defense, and that would be our DH.
If you've got two favored players at a position,
yeah,
you can make one of them a DH, so it's kind of a little bit of a cheat roll for the evening.
So we're asking people that are going to be watching this podcast or listening to the podcast to make their own selections, and if they do, we're going to give away a couple of prizes. One is going to be a jersey of your favorite player of all time, and we'll get that selection from you once we select who has made one of the best posts on one of the channels or one of the platforms in social media. And then as well, we're going to make some arrangements with Bill when baseball becomes a little bit more normalized, and we're going to give away a couple tickets to a Boston Red Sox game and allow you to witness the game itself from that professional level. And there's no other game better than actually sitting in the stands in Fenway Park, and I can say that personally because I've been there many times. So we'll do that on the podcast tonight, and when we see those selections, we'll definitely let people know who we've selected from those posts. We want people to engage and really enjoy this conversation, because I can tell you the three people that are on this show right now love the game as much or more than anybody I know. So I'm really excited about it. And, of course, being these guys are like brothers to me, it's just a fun night altogether. We've got our Scotch whiskey from Shiva's. I don't know what you have down there. Bill, you probably have some of your red wine that you produce probably on tap tonight.
No, I'm drinking Green State beer. It's a lager. It's a local lager. Lagers seem to have made a comeback this year, and IPAs kind of knocked me on my butt. So I can drink lager most of the day. And
Attaboy.
I was out. I chopped down a tree. It didn't hit me, so I'm a lucky lager.
Attaboy. So let's talk. Let's go into the game itself.
That was a bad joke, Bill.
Let's talk about.
Well, that's what it's the truth. It's a bad joke, but it's a true joke.
So, I mean, today, the innovation really started with Billy Beane and the Oakland A's with sabermetrics. But before that, a lot of writers and experts in the field really provided some statistics, whether it's Bill James, but the original came from a publication called the Baseball Encyclopedia. And, Barry, why don't you just tell a little story about the first time you received your first Baseball Encyclopedia?
Oh, yes. Well, I was, as a kid, I just love sports and really love baseball. And my father would always tell me stories. And when I was a kid, I couldn't get to sleep. I'd jump into bed with my parents, and there would be no stories about the Three Little Pigs or anything like that. My dad would tell me stories about baseball and hockey mostly. And I've been reading about this baseball encyclopedia as I was growing up through the 70s, and I just really wanted to have one. And it was the first compilation of statistics of every player that ever played. And it's a wonderful book, and I really wanted one, but they were expensive at the time. They're hard to find. And then my dad saw one advertised in a magazine, so he ordered it for me. And it took 6 months to get to the house. And when he opened it, it wasn't a Macmillan Baseball Encyclopedia. It was a cheap $4.99 knockoff. I don't know if I'd ever seen my dad so angry. But I was able to pick this version up when I was in university in the 80s, and it's signed by Ron Luciano, who may or may not be one of your favorites, Bill, and a couple of other athletes. So what I expect is someone probably took it to a local dinner where there were some celebrities there to sign autographs and speak.
I like Luciano. Luciano was entertaining. He was funny. You know, he had kind of a tragic end, but
yeah, he had his issues.
I really liked him.
Yeah, he was. He was likable on the surface. I mean, he was funny. He was a bundle of energy, and when he was doing announcing, he was fun to listen to. As an umpire, he liked to be part of the show.
Yeah, no kidding.
And that was before officials did that, and he was one of the first to really try to make himself part of the show.
You know, Bill, we were so relaxed up here, I even forgot to put the studio lights on. Barry and I were just sitting with the regular lights on for the first 5 minutes. We even forgot about it. So
I doubt we're going to look any better.
That is an absolute truth.
Well, you both have faces for radio.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I appreciate you, man.
That was Ron Luciano. That was one of his quotes. Was that he had a perfect face for radio.
He was cute. Yeah, I remember someone slid into second and he said, "You're out, but you're safe." And he says, "Yeah." I said, I know you're safe, but I made the out sign, and everybody in the stands thinks you're out, so you're out.
So, Bill, the first thing I want to ask you tonight is, in your career, what was the game, who was the pitcher that you pitched against that you felt was your toughest competition?
Wow. Well, when every hitter on the other team ran up to the plate to hit against you because they thought they could, it kind of, I never thought about who I was throwing against.
No, I'm talking about pitchers. I'm not worried about the hitters.
Jim Palmer, I beat Jim Palmer regularly. I beat a lot of Hall of Fame pitchers regularly. I beat Bill Stoneman when he was with the Angels. I looked at my 119 wins. A statistic man, Scott Russell, who wrote a statistical superiority of the black athlete in the early 1970s. It was rejected by all publishers, and he had Hispanic players in there too. He's my co-author on my new book and knows me probably better than anyone else. And I would say the greatest was Nolan Ryan. I beat Nolan Ryan a lot. I beat the greatest game, Joe Morgan, the manager, not the one who just passed away with Cincinnati. He said he saw the two greatest games ever pitched. The first one was by Harvey Haddix when he threw 12 perfect innings and got beat
and lost
on a Joe Adcock home run. And the second one was when I beat Palmer on Game of the Week at 2 o'clock. The game ended at 10:15. It was with rain delays and everything. It was 6 hours and 42 minutes, and I threw a 10-inning complete game.
Bill, do you happen to know?
That's my best game.
Do you happen to know the genesis of Harvey Haddix's nickname? Because most often athletes have nicknames to show that they're dominating or maybe they're ironic, and his nickname was the Kitten. And I wonder what drove. Was it because he was small? Because he wasn't a big guy, but he was like a Guidry, a small lefty that could throw hard.
Yes. You know what? I'll tell you the greatest Harvey Haddix story you'll ever hear. He was pitching. We got Boomer Scott back after his great year with Milwaukee. We got rid of him with Carbo and everything.
But you had to trade Cecil Cooper to get him.
Yes, we had to trade Cecil Cooper. It was a bad idea. Well, Cecil had struck out on Nolan Ryan like 14 times. Well, anyway, we get the Boomer for spring training. He was fat. He was out of shape. Harvey Haddix was 54 years old, and in batting practice, he said, "Boomer, I can throw 10 fastballs by you up and in, and you can't hit one of them." He threw 9 in a row. Scott swung and missed. The 10th one, he fouled back, straight back, and he looked at Harvey and he said, "I told you couldn't throw 10 by me."
I think Boomer still ended up hitting about 30 home runs that 1 year back with his first year back with the Red Sox.
Yeah, not that year, though. I'll tell you something. No, that was Butch Hobson hit 30 in 78. But Boomer Scott was the best defensive infielder, first baseman that I ever had in my life. And I'd have to rank him up there as number one defense. He made a play on Campaneris on a swinging bunt down the first baseline where I come over because I falled off the third base. I had to come over and I spun and threw it automatically. The ball went through Campaneris' legs and he went to the coaching box side and made a half hop on the ball like it was nothing. And I went, wow, welcome to the big league.
And the other thing, Bill, is that it isn't just how he looked, because he didn't look athletic. And when he'd make a great play like that, it wasn't just that. The numbers back it up. His numbers for fielding in terms of assists and putouts and everything else as a first baseman are fantastic. Perhaps the best of his era. Maybe the only one stronger in that era would have been Wes Parker.
Yes, Wes is on my list too. Wes, when he was 62 Dodgers, he was having psychological problems. You know, he was from a really rich town in L.A., and his father was really close with Bavasi, and he was a Dodger through and through from the beginning. And for a guy with those problems, he really had a tremendous career.
Yeah, and I think he stopped playing a little bit early and did a little bit of television and movies, but that was a bit it. His career ended a lot earlier than you would have expected based on his level of talent at the time.
Yeah, he was dating Rod Dato, my coach's second daughter, the real good-looking one. I can't remember her name, and that was in the 60s.
Well, you know, his 60s. First daughter is pretty pissed off at you right now because you described the second one as the good-looking one.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. If you saw Rod and his wife, I love Rod Dato, and I took Rod to Italy when I went down there for my first trip and we were there for 2 weeks in Milan and Venice, and we coached Italian baseball, and that was a great experience to take Rod Dato with me as my companion. And I've got to do some great trips. I mean,
oh yeah,
you know, I've got to go to Cuba with you, and you know, and all those trips and the pictures and the memories and the way they treated us and the way they loved Canadians, and you know, and
that's why Bill. That's why Bill. Honestly, that's why you need to be in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. It's not just that you played baseball in Montreal and did a fantastic job there. It's your ambassadorship work that you've done globally, representing our country, and you know, I'm sharing that with the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame right now, that it's very important for them to understand the work that you've done to promote the game. So, and
still does.
I thank all of you. I thank everybody. I thank all the people. But I am a man without borders.
That's the truth.
And you know, I sans frontier. I just wish we treated these 6,000 children in Guatemala that we displaced and everything else.
Yeah.
And I feel so embarrassed for our country right now. And, you know, I want to get to Canada, and I want to sue Elliot Trudeau because he's forcing my wife to listen to CSNBC and Fox Radio and TV, and it's driving her nuts, and it's in turn driving me nuts. So I've got to get back to Canada. It's like there was a guy named Sitting Bull, and when he was pressed and stuff, he ended up getting to Canada. And that's where he stayed up there until they put him on the reservation when he crossed the border again. And every Indian tribe I know, when they got mad at the U.S. government, they tried to get to Canada.
Yeah, and with Sitting Bull, they wanted him back in the States so badly because they wanted to essentially put an end to him. Because they had a free run through the West if they didn't have strong leadership from the native people at that time, and he was the strong leadership.
So let's talk about some of the
Baseball.
greatest pitchers of all time, Bill. Really what we're doing tonight
Walter Johnson.
Well,
Number one,
you're going to get your
Walter
votes. Don't worry. You're going to get your votes and your opinion. We're going to pick 5 guys. And really what we want to do is I just want you to interject with some of your comments. Barry and I are going to give our votes that we have, and then we're going to give you an opportunity to jump in and make your constructive comments and see if we're on the mark or some guys that you'd like to add to our list.
Right.
So, Barry, you've got 5 starting pitchers in your lineup. Why don't you share with our audience tonight who they are and why?
Well, my 5 starting pitchers. I start off with who I consider to be the greatest pitcher of all time. And when I look at this, I look at balancing career length and their peak performance years. And I go with Lefty Grove and as my best pitcher of all time. Mostly because he didn't start playing until he was 25 years old. And he was owned by a minor league team, and MLB teams are trying to purchase him all the time, and they just wouldn't give him up. He was worth too much until Connie Mack decided to purchase him for $100,600. And his first year was a good one, not great, but he showed that he had stuff, and then he went on a run that was just crazy. I mean, one year he led the league in wins and saves. I don't know how many times he won the ERA title, 7 or 9 or something like that. He was just incredible, and he got 300 wins starting his career at 25 years old.
Crazy. Number 2, Barry.
Number 2 is Walter Johnson. Now, he started when he was, very young, probably 19 or 20. But, I mean, his numbers are just – he didn't play for great teams, but his strikeout numbers and ERA numbers and all that through the say from 1910 to 1920 are just ridiculous. I mean, there was obviously no better pitcher during that 10 years. And I have him as my number 2 guy.
So, Bill, why you said Walter Johnson as well. From your perspective, why was he so dominant?
Well, I don't know his stats that well. I only know what other players said. I have an audio tape by a guy from the Hall of Fame, and he went and he talked to all the players, Sam Crawford, everybody. He didn't talk to Ty Cobb because, he didn't like Ty Cobb, and none of Ty Cobb's friends liked him either. He didn't have any friends. But they said, and every one of them said they were interviewed, and, Lefty Grove was in there and stuff. But these are guys that played a little bit before Grove. And the thing they said is that Walter Johnson, had a delivery that was really hard to pick up, and he would throw a game and it'd be, according to Dark, he'd finish that game and then he'd start the second game. He just he was a whip. And
so here's the stats,
everybody
Bill. Here's some of his stats. So he had 417 wins, 279 losses, a 2.17 ERA. He had almost 6,000 innings pitched, over 3,500 strikeouts, and a 1.06 whip.
And the thing is, he won 400 games, and
not on a good team.
Cy Young and a lot of the guys that kind of started out with large win numbers over their careers pitched mostly from 1890s on. And that's when guys would start 70 games and finish 50 of them. I mean, I'm exaggerating to some extent, but that's the type of thing you had. So you had guys that would play 10 years, and they'd have 300 wins. Johnson played during an era when baseball was getting a little more refined and was still able to pick up 400 wins. And I don't know anyone who started the career after Walter Johnson ever won more games.
And he was only 6'1".
Well, but back then,
but
6'1".
They say he had the longest arms and longest fingers. Long arms, long fingers, and he threw from
a sidearm whip motion. Yeah.
He was like Pedro.
And the other quote I heard, I wish I could remember the player that said it. He was asked about Walter Johnson, and he said, Walter Johnson had the best fastball I ever heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the audio tape is a beautiful audio tape, and it interviews all those people from that era.
And I think
Sam Crawford,
Yeah.
He's on my list, too. He's on my list for, I think he was a center fielder. And he's almost led the league in triples up until the 1970s. And that's an amazing
Wahoo Sam, right? I think.
Wahoo Sam Crawford, yeah. The greatest thing about the guy who did the book, he was looking for him in L.A., and his wife says, well, he doesn't like it down here. he's up along the coast between San Francisco, and he went up along the coast, and the guy doing the interview, he was in a laundromat, and he was sitting there, and he asked this kid if he knew, or an elderly man, and he goes, well, I'm Sam Crawford. He was doing his laundry in a town, up around probably Simeon Castle or San Luis Obispo. Probably was San Luis Obispo. And just those ball players, all they did, the good ones, like to read and travel. And that's what I like to do. I like to read and travel.
So we're heading into Barry's third selection for a pitcher. Who do you have, Barry?
I have Pedro Martinez as my third selection. Essentially, he was Lefty Grove of his own era. He didn't quite last as long as Lefty Grove, which is why I give the nod to Lefty Grove. But Pedro Martinez is probably the best pitcher I ever saw pitch live. What he could do with a ball. He could literally spin it or bend it any direction he wanted
and
at any speed.
Not a big guy either, right?
Not a big guy. No, his brother was, which was kind of strange.
Yeah.
But Pedro was not a big guy. After Pedro, I have Greg Maddux. His length of his career,
Four
there's
Cy
probably
Youngs in a row.
not many people that were as solid a pitcher for as long a period of time as he was. And he did have some peak years as well, but his peak wasn't as strong as Pedro's in my mind. So I
and Greg struggled in the majors early with Chicago. He didn't dominate
he didn't dominate
until late with the Cubs.
I think he was probably 19 or 20 when he first
he was young.
played.
He was very young.
So usually those first couple of years, if you're in your teens, early 20s, you don't go by the
You're
numbers.
growing. Yeah.
You know that they're going to get better. And my fifth guy is very much along the lines of Pedro, is Sandy Koufax, who probably no pitcher dominated for a stretch of 5 years more than Sandy Koufax did. But for the most part, that 5 years is his career. And he stopped pitching when he was 30.
Now, Bill,
his best year was his last year, and then he retired, 30 years old.
You grew up in California, and you came.
Oh yeah,
you come in just slightly after Sandy retired. So just tell me some stories about what you know about with Sandy.
Oh, Sandy is just unbelievable. Great basketball player, and he had a hard time throwing strikes. And basically, the catcher, there were two brothers. One of them was the Expo coach, in fact. Trying to think who he was, but he got him to back off on his fastball and got his control. And once he got into the control, then he could add a little bit. And that's why he was so dominant, is because he would throw a pitch for a strike, but the next fastball would be like 5 miles an hour faster. And then the third one would be 5 miles faster than that, and it'd be up. And he was the number one going up the ladder guy of all time. And he had a hook. I mean, like Blyleven, that you could hear it coming, and
Koufax
was
big.
Basically a two-pitch pitcher, huh?
He was a big guy. Koufax
was. He was tall.
6'2", 210.
Oh, his fingers. You look at his fingers. You look at Pedro's fingers. You look at Walter Johnson's fingers.
Yeah.
It's all about how the ball sits in their fingers.
Well, Bill, they're now starting to actually look at spin rate on a baseball, where those guys would have had incredible spin rates, right? And they now know, and it's a big conversation in every game about that spin rate. So you're right.
Well, we don't need spin rate. We can hear it. We can see it. We can hear the pop of the glove.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. We got to get away from statistics, damn statistics. We have to watch the game, speed up the game, and save the game. And let the players. We're playing so many games, so many times. I mean, they figure out the good hitters. They don't swing at that breaking ball in the dirt. They know it's coming and they lay off at the great hitters. Some hit outside the strike zone. The Roberto Clementis of the world.
Yeah.
But
Bill, one of my favorite ball players of all time was Gary Carter. He's not on my list. I don't think anyone swung at more curveballs in the dirt than Gary Carter did.
not in '81. I'm telling you, I never seen it. The reason we lost is because we couldn't score runs late in the game. We chased so many bad pitches.
You had so many young guys in that team, Bill, too, right? You had so many young guys in that team.
Hey, 79, 80, 81. We could have won it 3 years in a row.
I know.
With a little bit of luck.
So my swingman, which is my next pick on my pitching staff, is Carl Hubble. And he was kind of lefty Grove light. He didn't quite have the career Grove did, but he had one heck of a career. And he was similar to Grove in that when he wasn't the starter, he was often the closer. And he led the league in wins one year and saves the next, I believe. Very similar career to Sandy Koufax. And, of course, with Carl Hubble, you can't mention his name without mentioning that 5 top-tier Hall of Famers got struck out in succession in the All-Star game.
I remember that.
By Carl Hubble. You remember that, Dennis?
Well, not live.
Okay.
I remember watching it for the first time on the wonderful platform that we're on, YouTube.
Here are the names as I recall them. You got Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Joe Cronin, Jimmy Fox, and Al Simmons. They were 5. Cronin wasn't really a feared hitter, but he was a 300 hitter, and he was a Hall of Fame shortstop. But the other 4 guys were feared hitters. And he struck out 5 of them in a row. They'd probably never seen a screwball like his before.
No, it's the fadeaway. He had the greatest fadeaway of all time. They said when Hubble walked down the street, his hand was pronated.
Yeah.
Most people, the outside of your hand
faces in
on there, but it was his was by his knee.
Yeah.
And mine's getting that way. It's amazing because I throw so many pronated pitches.
And when Fernando Mania started, that was the big pitch for him too, was the fadeaway. I mean, not a lot of pitchers used it because it puts so much strain on your elbow and your shoulder to throw that pitch. But if you could throw it, it was super effective. But like Carl Hubble, you might end up, as you walk, that your knuckles scrape your side of your leg rather than face outside.
Well, if you notice in a slow motion of any pitch, when a guy throws the ball, Tom Seaver, anything, your arm pronates. And it's that ability to handle that pronation. And to handle that pronation, you have to have good brakes. Your brakes are your teres minor, your teres major, your supraspinatus, and your infraspinatus. They're your SIT muscles. They're the ones in the back of the shoulder that keep you from blowing out your labrum in the front. And that's why Mike Marshall is on my list, because he has the most game appearances, most saves, and he looked like a gynecologist.
Well, Bill, I remember being in Boston with you when they actually had you on the podium to discuss pitching at that time with the doctors, with the Red Sox, and all the press that was there that day.
Wasn't that a great day?
Oh, it was a great day, and you did a great job. You really explained to people in a way that they could understand that why there's so many injuries in pitching in baseball now. We're so romanticized by velocity.
They don't teach pitching. They don't teach drop and drive. They don't teach working on your brakes. The guy that saved my career or changed it was a guy named Gus Hoffling. And Gus Hoffling was with the Philadelphia Phillies. He trained Carlton, who's probably the greatest left-hander of the modern era, I think. You got the big unit, but he's a freak. No one's as big as him.
Yeah.
And his fingers are – it's just the big unit he's a freak. I mean, he's like 6'11". When the Expos had the big unit, on the Rich Griffin, the guy my friend that's with Toronto now, but he's with the Toronto Star, but he was the press secretary for the Expos. When Johnson got to the Expos, he said in the article, he said, at 6'10", he may be the tallest Expo left-hander of all time, but he certainly wasn't the highest.
Well, who would be that, Bill? I have no idea.
That's the public and all you people.
No, Bill, what I'll share with you to build onto that comment was watching baseball as a kid with my mom, watching the Expos play. And you were interviewed after a game, and you were talking about your dream home, and it would be on a mountain, and there'd be rivers flowing by full of beer. And you couldn't mention weed on the air, but you
and we can now.
You made a couple of comments that could be inferred as being weed positive, and my mother just loved you. She so much enjoyed that interview, and she loved watching you pitch. And so when I was able to tell her one time that I had played basketball against you at an outdoor court in Sydney. I got home and said, "Guess what, Mom? Guess who I played basketball against?" She said, "Who?" I said, "Bill Lee." And she was so excited because I'd gotten to play basketball with you.
And you're still playing basketball too, Bill.
Yeah,
You're still playing. You battle.
Well, it's funny. I go to do an interview. I'm down in Fall River, and the announcer says he won't interview me until he takes me to the Y and I shoot 10 free throws. And so I had my logging boots on. I'd just been bringing a load of wood down to my wood guy down at Axis Bat, Louis Ledoux. So he brings me in there, and I do my stretches. I do everything else, and I go and I hit the first 6 in a row. And this little kid who was rebounding for him, he started throwing the ball at my knees and my ankles and having it, he was giving me the ball, and then he tried to make it difficult, got me off of my spot. I missed 2, and then I hit the last 2. I had 8 out of 10 that hadn't played basketball in a year. And it's like throwing darts, throwing strikes, and it's basketball was my second love.
Now you're talking a closer. I mean, the closer really started to come in. I guess Rolly Fingers was really considered the. Well,
no, you had guys like Joe Page in the 50s.
Joe Page was the first, and the second was a guy named Dick Raditz, the monster.
Yeah, and he was, he was 60s, Red Sox, and he was a monster.
Really?
But he, again, short career, dominate for a few years and short career. I mean, the thing is, pitchers were used to saving a little bit, like not throwing your hardest. Like, you had to last a number of innings.
Right.
The relief pitchers, I think they started to realize the freedom they had.
Yeah.
But relief pitchers then, your best relief pitcher, like Goose Gossage, would come in the 7th or 8th inning.
I remember.
They'd get 2 inning saves and sometimes 3 inning saves.
Exactly.
It was a different era. But my relief pitcher, it's Mariano Rivera, and I can't imagine
in a heartbeat.
Anyone else. But my second choice is Rich Gossage, who I just mentioned. And for a couple of years, they tried to make him into a starter. Just didn't work. And they put him back in relief. And he was so good that after Sparky Lyle had one of the better relief pitching seasons of all time, the Yankees signed Gossage as a free agent when they already had Lyle, who had I think, just won the Cy Young Award, if not the Fireman Award if they had it at the time. But
he won Cy Young, and then they brought Gossage in, and Lyle kind of faded really quick.
That's how good Gossage was. He was able to knock off the reigning Cy Young winner from his role as closer. So that's my my backup guy, and I'm just going to mention a number of pitchers.
Well, just hang on, Bree. I'll mention one thing because I'm just going to jump in and I'm just going to add some of the ones. But one of the guys that actually Bill would have been around the game at the same time was Dennis Eckersley. Do you have any Dennis Eckersley stories, Bill?
That you can tell?
Oh, do I have Dennis Eckersley?
Yeah, but you have to be able to tell them.
Well, no, I can't tell them.
No, Bill.
This is a safe space. You can say anything
on this show. You can tell those stories. We're not on a typical radio station.
I know. Well, this is the best. Eckersley and I think it was we were in Milwaukee. I'm pretty sure, and we were at it was one of these nightclubs that had lasers and stuff, and it was kind of. There were gay people in there. There were everybody in there. It was like Xenons in New York, a kind of a knockoff copy. And this guy came and gave him a Jack Daniels, and he was gay, and he looked at Eckersley, and Eckersley dropped the drink out of his hand. It fell to the carpet and didn't spill a drop. And I went, Eck, that's the greatest balance I've ever seen. And that was Eck. Eck never walked anybody. He was exactly like Walter Johnson, Dick Raditz, Pedro. He threw from that slinging attitude, but he kept his wrist straight. So, he would throw from out there, and he could throw that Mario Rivera cutter fastball, and he could throw the one on the inside part of the plate, and he had a good breaking ball. And you look at the record he had. He is the only Hall of Famer, I think, with 200 wins, 200 saves.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
And they were all quality saves.
One thing I found cool about Eckersley was the style that he threw. He threw that whip type of style. Is that, Johnny Vandermeer threw 2 consecutive no-hitters, which I can I can read that 20,000 times and still be amazed by it. The next pitcher that almost did it was a guy named Ewell Blackwell, and he threw just like Eckersley. He was Ewell the Whip Blackwell, and he had a no-hitter, and then in his next start out, he had a no-hitter going after 7 or 8 innings. The next closest pitcher... He
was exactly the same pitcher. Isn't it amazing? He had the same delivery.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
And Eckersley was the next pitcher to almost do it. He threw a no-hitter for Cleveland, and his next time out, he threw 5 or 6 or 7 innings of no-hit ball. Yeah. So it just struck me as funny that style of pitching...
produce that kind of result.
For 30 years apart,
yeah.
Blackwell and Eckersley. And they both almost tied a record that will never be beaten. I can't imagine anyone will ever throw 3 no-hitters in a row. I doubt it'll ever be tied.
No.
So for me...
Statistically, probably, yeah. I'll tell you a Ewell Blackwell story if they got time.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm with Ewell Blackwell and his wife. We were at a dinner for Major League Baseball. He was very elderly. He just come down, and he wasn't too healthy. He came down from North Carolina, and I sat at his table, and we were telling stories, and he took his arm around me and stuff, and I didn't know that about his almost 2 no-hitters, but he said he was pitching against Willie Mays. This young black kid was in New York, said he was going to be the greatest player of all time. He said, I threw at him and hit him twice, and he goes, and Happy Chandler called him into the office. Happy Chandler was the commissioner, and he calls him in there, and Ewell's talking to me. He says, yeah, I was smoking back then. I knew what it was all about, and he's taking all this North Carolina hill draw, and he says, I took a match, and I burned my middle finger, and I put a little blister on it. And they go into the office, and Happy goes, well, why did you, the blister bothered you and everything else? He says, yeah. He says, well, why did you throw at Willie Mays and hit Willie Mays? He says, well, I threw it the other twice, and that's how it was back then. It was unbelievable how racist it was and everything, but he didn't say it it was derogatory by the language, but it was, it was just because Willie said he was going to be the greatest pitcher of all time. But think about that era and where we are now with the Black Lives Matter and everything else. It's just, it's an amazing game we've gotten into.
And I expect Mays' name will come up later, Bill.
Yeah, probably.
But he struggled.
Well,
he struggled that first month
is,
or so in the major leagues. And
yes, he did.
And I think it was DeRocher his manager then?
It was DeRocher.
And DeRocher essentially said, I don't care if he struggles. He's the best player on my team.
Yeah,
he's going to play.
That's exactly what it was.
And DeRocher was eminently hateable, but he
he knew baseball. Like Zimmer knew baseball.
He was a great baseball mind. Yeah, and Billy Martin, sometimes Dick Williams, I guess, but a lot of those really good managers, they're really good for a few years, and they start to burn players out, I think.
So
I got Billy Martin fired from the Texas Rangers.
I want to segue into that, Bill. I want to go into a manager story for you. Go into the Montreal Expo's time when you were there and talk about when Fanning came in as a manager and what happened to the club and what your personal opinion was on it.
Well, we lost our first games against Philly when we just come back from the strike and they named Fanning manager and everything. And everybody was complaining, and we had a players-only meeting and stuff. We didn't have Fanning or the coaches in there. And I think it was Cromartie said, anybody know where Dick Williams lives? And I said, yeah, I know where he lives, but you guys hated him, especially you, Steve, and everybody. I said, but, when you pitched well when Dick was our manager because you wanted to prove him wrong. And we all wanted to prove him wrong. And you just can't let Fanning, dictate. Don't make him put him in a position where we can lose a ball game. And we went out and won like 15 in a row, and we got back in the hunt. And finally, we caught Philly. We won the second half. We played Philly, and Rogers threw 2 games against Philly, and we go against the Dodgers. But it all boiled down to Fanning leaving Rogers in there against Rick Monday. And that is probably the thing that I hated Fanning the most, that he took it personally with me and cost Montreal the world championship by not letting me face Rick Monday.
Well, because
and here's a great story. I left. I went on a trip this year. I got a call from my Russian coach and translator that I play with in Florida and in Moscow, and he has a baseball school in Iowa. He asked me, Bill, I need your help. You got to come out. I drive all the way to Spirit Lake, Iowa. I go out there. I'm there for 3 or 4 days. I help the kids. I save their program. And I go to Northwest Iowa State on a back road. And he says, I got two friends here. They're Yankee fans, but they would love to meet you. I go down. I meet them at a field on this back road in Iowa. It's Jim Fanning Field.
Really?
I go, you got to be kidding me. Jim Fanning's from Iowa. He says, yeah, he was born on a farm right down here. He only lived here a short time, but they got a field named after him. And I saw a sycamore tree out in center field, and I went and took a piss on it.
I mean, it makes sense, Bill. I mean, the type of pitcher that you were, you have someone like Rogers in the game, and I know he was, your ace of the staff, but legitimately a guy like Monday coming into the game as a hitter, it only made sense that you should face him. You're a tough left-hander facing a left-handed batter. That happens all the time.
Say almost hit a home run off him earlier in the inning. Yeah, he gave up a foul home run. He almost gave up a home run to the fence. He had nothing. I saw him in the bullpen warming up. I went down and warmed up on my own. Fanning went to the hill when Monday was announced, and he left Rogers in to throw to Monday, and it cost us everything.
Yeah, and we brought up.
You read a false. Yeah.
Yeah, we brought up Monday's splits, Bill, and versus right-handed pitchers, his OPS was almost 200 points or 160 points higher against right-handed pitchers than left-handed pitchers. And just in terms of batting average.
I pitched against him in Arizona,
He struggled against lefties.
I own Monday.
Against lefties, he looked like a middle infielder from the early 70s. Bat 237.
Well, I'll tell you something. I owned him and all the way up the line. He played for the Alaska Gold Panthers. I played for the Alaska Gold Panthers. He went to Arizona. I went to USC. It's this stuff, this OPS and everything else like that. I know I was throwing the ball good in 81. I had 11 holds. Like I said, I had led the team in ERA. You have to bring me in that situation. You have to.
But he took it personal. We know that.
He took it personally. He must have taken. Here's the amazing thing that you guys don't know. In 1968, I'm college pitcher of the year in the World Series in Omaha, Nebraska, and I was scouted by two people. I found the scouting report. You can look it up. Mickey McDermott, the crazy left-hander, he scouted me, and the guy sitting next to him in the scouting booth with the Milwaukee Braves was Jim Fanning.
Really?
Jim
that's
Fanning
cool.
saw me. It is. But Fanning never mentioned that to me. He never knew me before.
He must not have liked what he saw, Bill. He must not have liked what he saw.
He said I had a good body. That's all he said.
Yeah. So like
a pretty good curveball.
My selection of pitchers were very similar to Barry's. I had Pedro Martinez. I had Sandy Koufax. I had Greg Maddux. I mentioned Eckersley earlier. The only three guys that I have different, and we can comment, and I'll put all three together, is I had Cy Young. The trophy's named after him. Randy Johnson, which you mentioned earlier, Bill, and Christy Mathewson. Yeah. So you can make your comments on all those three guys: Cy Young, Randy Johnson, and Christy Mathewson.
There's so many really, 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 really good pitchers, and Dennis and I talked about this before we called you, Bill. Is that there's literally, you could take 20 pitchers and just throw their names in a hat and haul out 5 of them, and you're going to do really good. The names I added are Spahn and Carlton and Satchel Paige.
Satchel Paige, yeah. Tell us a Satchel Paige story, Bill. You have to have a Satchel Paige story, I'm sure.
I do. First, I want to tell you my two are Juan Marichal and Spahn. They got together in a game and went 16 innings, and Mays hit a changeup out of the park off of Spahn and beat him. And they said Marichal was supposed to come out. Alvin Dark said, "You're out of there." He says, "If that old man goes to the mound, I'm going to the mound." And I think it was one of the greatest pitching contests of all time. And they were both involved. But I got Bob Gibson in there too.
Yeah.
Gibby just died. And I want to tell you something. He was tough. He was mean. Felipe Alou tells the story. He says he was warned that when he faced a black player for the first time, he drilled him to let him know that there would be no quarter because of the color of your skin. And Felipe just got nicked on the elbow and stuff, but he went down on the ground and writhed in pain to let Gibson think he hit him hard.
So he wouldn't hit him again.
Yeah, so he wouldn't hit him again.
So we've mentioned a lot of great pitchers, but I do want to do a little honorable mention because obviously we love the country that we're in, and obviously you are Canadian, Bill. You know, it's the way it is, and that's Fergie Jenkins. You know, for Canada, he's got to be the greatest pitcher of all time.
Well, for Fergie Jenkins, what was impressive about his career was his control. I mean, he was in an era when the guys that struck out 260 guys, they walked 130 guys. Not Fergie. Fergie would have a ratio of like 4 strikeouts to a walk type of thing in his career. I mean, he had probably the best control of a strikeout pitcher from, say, 1965 to 1980.
Yeah, and he played in a bandbox, Wrigley Field. The key to him was his long fingers, his lanky delivery, and the fact that he could spot that sinker anytime he wanted, and you weren't elevating his sinker. And he had a really good slider, to keep you honest, and he pitched both sides of the plate really well, and very seldom threw the ball down the middle. Yeah, he's in the Hall of Fame, and he should be one of the top players of all time.
And he was an excellent hitter, and I know you'll love this, I believe he was an excellent basketball player.
Oh my God, he played for the Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, he was a great athlete.
So let's go to
and he's a chapter in my book. When we went up to British Columbia and went fishing, and the black bear came out. And we saw him cross the river twice, and every time he crossed it, he was getting closer to us. And I said, Fergie, I said, I don't have to outrun that bear. I only got to outrun you.
So, Bill, you have many books that you've published over the years, obviously, but the newest book, why don't you tell our listeners the newest book that you've just finished and where they can get access to it?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.ca. It's on Amazon.com. It's all over the place. It just came out. I think it's about 500 pages with the pictures. It's got a great cover photograph that I don't know where that came from, but it's spectacular. I'm on a 1955 bus in the back of the bus, which is very apropos because John Milner said I was the only white guy allowed in the back of the bus. And I told the Hammer back then in those days, I said, John, I didn't know I was white. And that's why I was so accepted. I was player rep wherever I went. And it's called the Spaceman Chronicles. And there's a disclaimer in the beginning. It says you have to have read a Vonnegut book, a Heller book. You've had to read Catch-22 before you're allowed to read this book because it won't mean that much to you. So basically, it's a book to encourage you to read outside your boundaries to try to save the planet Earth. Yeah.
Well, I saw the Alan Arkin movie version of Catch-22. Does that count, or do I have to run out and read the book?
Oh, no, that counts.
Okay, good.
No, you don't.
You can read a book in a day.
You know the Man in White and Joseph Heller, the guy that's in the cast, where the nurses don't know what to do and they just keep changing the bottles, the top one to the bottom one, then the bottom one back to the top. There are scenes in that movie that are tough to watch, but the book itself, I had a guy, his name Palatkas. He's a professor of communication at Auburn University, and he was at Bowling Green University. He taught a course on me. It was called Bill Lee 101, and he literally gave people credit for taking a course on me, and he compared me to the Yossarian of baseball, and there can be no greater compliment for a contrarian to be called the Yossarian of baseball.
And the thing is, the book and the movie were so important that they literally took a phrase that was unique to a certain part of the population and made it everyone's. I mean, a catch-22 is just how people describe. If they're in a situation where you're told you have to do something to be able to get to there, but the thing that you have to do isn't possible. That's a catch-22.
It is. Yeah. It's where we are right now in our political situation in the United States.
Amen.
You know, we have a Biden that has Alzheimer's against a Trump that has egomania.
Yeah.
What do you want? You know, what are you going to get? you're going to get two systems. Did anyone in your crowd or on there name me the last U.S. person to win the Nobel Peace Prize? I'll hear them clicking in.
It wasn't Barack.
And you'll never get it. It was a lady from Vermont who did it because of landmines. She spent her whole life trying to ban landmines. And Bill Clinton didn't give her credit, never announced her because he wouldn't sign the accord, the accord in the United Nations. Bill Clinton is a Democrat, considered everything, and Donald Trump is a Republican. There is no difference between our two parties. You have to read Eugene Debs, you have to read Marvin Miller, and what he did, the labor unions and the defeat.
Well, Bill, if we wanted to talk politics,
Bill, we don't want to talk
another 6 hours.
Listen,
it is not politics.
This channel's all baseball.
Yeah. It is baseball.
Yeah.
It's baseball.
Yeah.
Why is baseball great? Because we're not talking what money they made. Well, we did kind of bit. You talked about the owners and the buying of the players.
But very little.
But you can take a guy from Kansas, and it's the greatest game because it's not what you make or what you do. It's what you do at a given time with no clock. It's the only game that's no clock, and that's why baseball's so great.
Amen. Yeah. Okay, position players. We're going to go position by position. Barry's going to give his vote. I'll give my vote. Bill, you'll give your vote. Then we're going to have discussion on it. All right?
Well,
okay.
You want me to go first with catcher, right?
Yeah.
Well, I have to go with Josh Gibson.
And I did too.
And the thing is, the trouble with trying to rank Negro League players, especially those like Gibson who never played MLB, is that it's hard to compare statistics. But the anecdotal evidence about Gibson is just so strong that he knocks ahead of my second choice, which was Johnny Bench.
Yeah.
And
exactly the same for me.
And Bench is kind of just ahead of Mickey Cochran, and for me anyway. And the thing with Bench is that he caught differently than everybody else, and in catching differently, he was better than everybody else. I mean, he was the first guy to not have the throwing hand or the meat hand next to the catcher's mitt. He was the guy that started catching one-handed, and that's whenever you make changes in baseball, it's like an institution. If things have been done a certain way for 100 years, it doesn't matter if it's better to do it a different way. It's hard to make that change. But Bench changed that, and catchers started catching differently because of Johnny Bench.
Now, Bill, you faced Johnny Bench in the 75 World Series, so you saw that firsthand. Tell us some stories about Johnny.
Yeah, I got him to hit a double play ball. In Game 7. We didn't turn it, You still on?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're here.
I heard a flash. I'll tell you what he did to me. I bunted. Oh, someone's trying to get through to me, I think. That's what I ain't going to pick it up.
That's no problem.
I bunted the ball down the third baseline, and I remember there was no one on base. And Johnny Bench left his position before the ball was even to my bat. And he went out there and got it halfway to third and threw me out by half a step. And then, I'm telling you, and then I hit that ball in Game 7, and Geronimo ran it down, or I would have had 3 RBIs, and we would have been up 6-0.
Yeah.
And that would have been Katie bar the door, too wet to plow. Wow, I would have loved to have had a 6-run lead with 2 outs and a runner at first base. No way I would have thrown that curveball to Perez.
Yeah. So you mentioned your hitting, which I think you have a little bit of pride in. In fact, I saw you in a home run hitting contest in Cuba. I think you lost, but hey, you competed. That was the big part of it. Fergie Jenkins, he was a fantastic hitter.
Yes, he was. He didn't pull the ball. Yeah. He was one of those guys. He got off the plate and he hit the ball to right field really well.
Yeah, and I think he may have even had a year where he batted 300 and in his career. I know Jim Hunter had one where he batted 300 in 120 games, which was kind of cool.
All right,
you know who we didn't put on the pitchers list as greatest pitchers? Babe Ruth.
Yeah, valid point.
Short career. Short career.
Short career.
It was as a pitcher. It was.
Doesn't matter.
Hey,
doesn't matter.
Yeah, when his record,
he held the record for most consecutive scoreless innings
in the World Series.
That was beaten
for 40 years. Yeah, I think Whitey Ford beat that.
No, I think it was Drysdale it was
look that up, Michael.
Hershiser. I think.
Look that up.
Well,
Hershiser
his was a different streak. That was a regular season streak. Hershiser, I think,
in the World Series, Michael.
Yeah.
In the World Series, most scoreless innings in the World Series in a row, right, Bill?
Yes, most consecutive scoreless
most
innings.
Scoreless
innings and scoreless innings and stuff.
Hey, it's Whitey Ford.
Whitey Ford.
Oh, that's right. It was Whitey Ford. That's right.
Bill, you should know not to dope me now, right?
No.
Bill, he's my encyclopedia, man.
I got to go open a new beer. Hold on.
Absolutely.
All right.
You guys talk. Talk.
So, Barry, going to first base. Let's go.
First base. Well, I have to go with Lou Gehrig. It's pretty hard not to go with Lou Gehrig.
I did too.
But I have to give some props to Albert Pujols. If the second half of his career had only been even 80% of the first half of his career, he might have surpassed Lou Gehrig. But essentially, Pujols for half of his career was Lou Gehrig and maybe a bit better because Pujols was pretty awesome defensively. But the second half of his career, essentially, he's been a stone.
Yeah, he's been struggling hard.
I mean, he's been good. He, bat 280 with whatever. I mean, but he wasn't Pujols. He wasn't
Albert Pujols. That guy was batting 350.
The guy that they signed is no longer the guy that's playing for them.
Exactly.
But
and it's funny because
he was that good though for the first half of his career. The
Angels didn't get much of Albert Pujols. Right?
No, they got a guy who was okay.
Yeah, the Cardinals got all of Albert Pujols.
Yeah, you pay $10 million a year for okay.
Wow.
Not $30 million a year.
Well, you can see his stats here, just 2020 compared to the rest of his career, just the batting average alone.
No, every year I think if you did a graph, you'd find that his numbers are going down and down and down a little bit, which is not uncommon. But he had a quick drop off. If you look at his career when he was 30, was his last really dominating season. And then after that, there are good seasons, but not Hall of Fame seasons. But his first half of his career was just so incredible that now it's unfortunate. He's lasted long enough to drag his batting average below 300.
That's crazy. It really is. Because the home runs that he's trying to get to set his real record in stone.
That is really crazy. When you look at the numbers of what he had for batting average before he was 30, you're right. That's crazy.
Yeah. No,
I want to tell you, I was having a banquet with when they got Pujols from St. Louis with the California Angels. I'm having a dinner with the guy. He was the babysitter for that guy in the movie they made Unbroken, the great double miler, that was shot down and captured by the Japs and tortured by the Japanese.
Oh, yes, right.
Yeah. So anyway, that man had babysat the president of the California Angels, and he's telling me how proud he was that they got Pujols, and they said he could still run. I said, yeah, he can still run. He just can't stop and turn and go to second.
So we haven't gone far, Bill. We mentioned our pick for top first baseman. Both of us picked Lou Gehrig, and then Barry mentioned an honorable mention of Albert Pujols. So do you have anybody to add to that? Wow. You obviously talked about Boomer being a really good defensive first baseman. Do you have anyone else? Do you have in mind in the era that you played in?
I'm trying to think. No, a first baseman is a guy that's the last position you play before you become a coach.
Or a DH. Or a DH.
Yeah.
It's called.
And the next position before that is third baseman, and that's a first baseman with a good arm.
Yeah, and it's called like the wrong side of the defensive spectrum. So if you're no longer good enough to play third base, you play first base.
I don't know if I would call this guy. I wouldn't put this guy in like the conversation of greatest first baseman of all time, but he was a Hall of Famer, and you did play against him, and that's Eddie Murray from the Baltimore Orioles. I mean, Eddie was a switch hitter and a pretty darn good defensive first baseman.
Yeah, I don't remember him that well there, and All I remember is he couldn't hit a changeup. Most switch hitters have a hard time with the changeup, and I had pretty good success with that. And so it's things that I learned over the course. Yeah, first baseman. I can't think of that really have. Boomer Scott was the best defensive first baseman I ever got to play. Play in front of, or whatever you say, but. He was spectacular. And Gehrig, I never saw him play that much defensive and stuff, but what a tremendous longevity and play with Ruth and all those world championships.
What an ambassador to the game too, right? Well, I mean, just a real example to the game.
And the Yankees had a bit of an advantage because he played college baseball, so he wasn't owned by anyone. So when he finished at Columbia, it's whatever team wanted him could grab him. Where if he had been playing in the minor leagues or something like that, he might have been like Lefty Grove and stuck there for 5 or 6 years before he got his chance.
Second base, Barry. Second baseman.
Second baseman. Probably my favorite, even though he wasn't from my favorite team from when I was a kid, he was my favorite player when I was a kid, and it's Joe Morgan is my second baseman. And my honorable mention is Rogers Hornsby, whose numbers are just so incredible that really saying Morgan was the best seems silly. But, hey, I love my guy. I'm taking Joe Morgan. Yeah. He could do absolutely everything on a ball field. And he was a terrible announcer. But he was a great baseball player.
Okay, so, Bill, my vote was a guy that I changed my number for. And I was in Boston with Michael. And we were in the pro shop one day, and Michael was just a young guy, and there was
Johnny McDonald.
There was a number on the wall, number 42, and Michael asked me what that number was, and I said, it's a story of Jackie Robinson and what he represented. And what was very cool, which I didn't even realize at that moment, was the day that we walk into the stadium. It said, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Jackie Robinson Day," and that was the moment I changed my number from 34 to 42, and I don't think anybody has to explain why someone would choose Jackie Robinson as the greatest second baseman of all time.
Dennis, what am I wearing right now?
You're wearing Jackie Robinson's jersey.
Yeah, he's a great.
But you picked Joe Morgan because you love Joe Morgan.
Oh, absolutely.
Joe Morgan's he's actually from near Oakland. He's from Alameda, and he used to play at a great ballpark. And it had a really short right field porch, and that's why he could hit fly ball home runs, because he played in that porch. He developed that swing out of high school.
Yeah, and he wasn't a big guy. I mean, well, he wasn't a tall guy, but he was solid. Like, he was like 5'6", 5'7", but he was probably something in the range of 170, 180 pounds. So he was solid.
He was a toy cannon.
But I mean,
like a toy cannon.
I mean,
like Jimmy Wynn.
Yeah, I admire Joe Morgan, but I don't know of another player in Major League Baseball that endured more pressure than Jackie Robinson. It had to affect his stats. He would have had even better stats if he didn't go through what he went through, but that he left an indelible mark in the game that no one else will ever leave. So he has put an imprint in the game that will always be there. Well, that's obvious because he's the only number that's retired in every Major League Baseball stadium. So,
and the thing is, I mean, I love Jackie Robinson. I'm wearing a Jackie Robinson jersey. He went through stuff that we can't imagine, really, and it's hard to quantify that in terms of effects as a baseball player. But he wasn't only a very good second baseman; he was a very good third baseman too, like one of the better defensive third baseman in baseball when he moved across the diamond.
And he started out playing first base for the Dodgers.
Yeah, only because he didn't fit in.
Yeah, he played first base when he first played for the Dodgers, Bill. It was crazy. All right, Barry.
Well, mine, you want my second baseman?
I would love to hear it.
My it's not the best, but he's my favorite of all time was Bill Mazeroski. I love Mazeroski. He was called no touch. He was dependable. You never took him out at second. And my favorite player on the field, my most important player on the field, is my second baseman, because I give up so many ground balls.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I have to have a really good defense. I don't care if the second baseman hits like a pitcher, as long as he can play second.
And the thing is with Mazeroski, he might be the first Hall of Famer primarily for his defensive prowess. He was that much better defensively than every other second baseman of his era, and he was an average hitter. But when you add those two together, he was a fantastic player. Plus the clutch home run. I mean, he was a wonderful player. I like that pick, Bill.
Yeah, when he hit the home run, who was playing left field?
Yogi Berra.
Yes, Yogi Berra. No one knows that.
Were you trying to? No one knows that. Not even me. You tried to sneak another one by me.
Nobody knows that, Bill.
No, I said only you and I know that.
and Yogi used to know it.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I know it so much is you always see his number flailing away, going to the fence.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, that was a blast. That was a blast at Forbes Field. That was a long way.
So we're heading to third base. We talked about third base earlier.
Third baseman is one of the few positions, it and shortstop, and maybe center field, where really only one name came to mind. There's a bunch of other names, but Mike Schmidt, I think by far is the best third baseman in Major League history. And I don't think it's particularly close.
I knew you'd pick him.
He's the best hitter of all time.
He's a great defensive
and he was great
third
defensively
baseman.
too.
Like really a great defense.
And he's a good base runner for his size.
And there are some really great defensive third basemen that played the game but did not have the offensive stats that Schmidt has.
I mean, Brooks Robinson was fantastic
absolutely.
Defensively, and he was good, like above average offensively for the first half of his career, but the last half of Brooks Robinson's career, he was just an average hitter, but he was always an incredible defensive third baseman.
My guy, I knew you'd pick Schmidt, so I looked at George Brett. I mean, George Brett has just been a killer for the Blue Jays, who's my favorite team, and Brett just led an incredible career for that organization, and obviously he's still leading the organization and the management, and he was an incredibly tough out, especially in the playoffs.
Yeah,
so.
and Brett's probably my second choice, and a close second because it's tough to choose between Brett and Eddie Matthews for second place for me, but Schmidt in first place, he's by himself. I don't think there's anyone close.
Bill, what's your vote?
Well, I mean, Schmidt was really, really good. I got him out fine. I seemed to do pretty well with him. Brett was amazing. The reason this is an amazing story, but Charlie Lau, he got him off the plate and he hit the ball the other way. And when you hit the ball the other way on AstroTurf, you hit the ball in the gaps a lot more because when you pull the ball on the ground, that the energy is conserved. You get straight hops. He could, on a wet field, he would slice the ball, and Brett was unbelievable. That's the thing I noticed about his style of hitting.
And
even though Ted Williams said Charlie Lau set hitting back 100 years.
I love George Brett's 1979 season when he had 42 doubles, 20 triples, and 23 home runs. He had more than 20 of each of doubles, triples, and home runs. I don't know if it's been done since.
No, what an alley hitter. He was amazing.
What a park. The park was built for him.
Yeah.
My best Brett story was when he was 17 years old. He was walking down the street in 69 with Kemmer, Brett, and I, and we were going down Commonwealth, and we went by 344 Com Ave where all the stewardesses were, and they were drop dead gorgeous. And little Georgie Brett was looking at one of them, and he ran right into a parking sign and had to have stitches.
That might have been by plan. Can you imagine? It's like, oh, you're wounded, you're injured. Can I help you?
We've got to tag George Brett in this, make him hear this for sure.
And here's the other thing, is that George Brett, if things had changed a little bit differently, might have been the second best hitter in his family.
Yeah, true.
Oh, yeah, Kenny could hit. He has a record, I think, he had 5 starts in the National League and hit a home run in all 5 starts.
Yeah, he may have been the best hitting pitcher in your era.
Oh, by far. He was Gary Peters, him, Earl Wilson.
You're in there.
There were some great hitting pitchers back then.
Now, Bill's better than average, but he's not up with Earl Wilson.
No, I am not. Here's what happened to me. They took the bat out of my hand, 73, 74, 75.
Right.
My 3 years when I would have started. And, but then I could have been beaned. I may have not have had the career I had.
That's true.
You may never have met us, and your life would have been so much lesser.
Yeah. Shortstop, what do you have, Barry?
Shortstop. I have Honus Wagner.
So do I.
And I don't think that we can even have a discussion that involves anyone else, although there are obviously a lot of great shortstops because it's such an important position. But
It's amazing. The first time
he was huge.
Well,
right now, if you took his size, you've got it up there, 5'11", 200. I thought he was bigger than that, but even then, that's big for a shortstop.
he's the big W, like the big M in hockey.
I mean, Bill has talked about people's size of people's hands. Take a look at some pictures of Honus Wagner's hands.
Pull it up, Mike. Pull it up.
I mean, you take these books. These books are smaller than his hands.
He batted 328 career batting average. Not too bad.
Oh yeah, and he did everything. He stole bases. He hit for power for the era, because if he hit 8 home runs then, that was a big power year. Look how big his hands are in some of those pictures. I mean, that's just craziness. It's unnatural. I mean, he had hands of a guy 7'7".
And that means you wield a bigger bat too, right? Like that's the biggest thing, is that if you have big hands and strong hands
he had a big bat.
You can hold a big bat.
And back then the bats weren't like the narrow handles, whip it around like we have today.
Yeah, that's the picture right there. You can see it compared to the other guy's hand.
The other guy's hands disappear inside of Honus Wagner's hands in that photograph where they're shaking hands. That's awesome.
Bill, what's your vote for top shortstop? Or even if you don't have a top pick, the top shortstop that was in your era.
The one I like, I think defensively. I don't care if they can hit Vizquel.
Yeah, but he wasn't as good defensively as Ozzie, though. I mean, Ozzie was his superior.
I like Latin. I like Venezuelans because I played in Venezuela. And Aparicio was my shortstop. I saw Aparicio make one of the best bad hop fielders I ever saw was Aparicio.
Yeah, Vizquel had a chance. I mean, he might still sneak into the Hall of Fame if his managerial career had lasted a little bit longer, because he had some success there, and he might have been able to parlay both his managerial and his playing career into a Hall of Fame. He's one of those borderline guys.
I'll tell you who I think the best shortstop right now is the guy from the Dodgers. He is as steady as they get.
He's tough. Sager. And he's becoming a great hitter at the same time.
And not to get off the track on all time, but I kind of like Francisco Lindor as the best shortstop of present day.
And I want to go back to Honus Wagner for 1 second, though. Honus Wagner, I remember in the 80s when Gretzky and Bruce McNall bid on that card.
Yeah, they owned it.
What was it? How much? 1.2 million?
It was over $1 million.
Michael, check Gretzky and McNall, Honus Wagner baseball card.
I expect the story behind the story, and I expect most people that would be willing to watch this podcast probably know it. But back in the early 1900s, cigarette companies to sell cigarettes would include a baseball card in each of their packets, and they included Honus Wagner. But Honus Wagner was a definite non-drinker, non-smoker, non-sex with multiple women type of guy, and he took great offense to the fact that he was shown on a baseball card. So they had to stop printing him. So you got a card of one of the two best players of his era. It was essentially him and Cobb. And all of a sudden, there's limited amounts of that card because he shut it down because he didn't believe in smoking. He didn't believe in drinking. So his card now, I mean, you get
$451,000. Gretzky and McNall bought or bid on that card, and owners just recently $1.27 million in 2000.
Bill, I just got a Bill Lee card for 50 cents, just in case you were wondering.
Yeah.
Can you sign it?
I made my business card. My business card to this day
is your baseball card.
Is the size of a tobacco card.
That's so cool.
Bill Spaceman wine, and it's a watercolor picture of me in my front yard, and in my hand I'm throwing a baseball, but it's actually the planet Earth.
Yeah. Bill, I'm in an online baseball community, and Dennis
still called Gymnasium.
It's called Imagine Sports now.
Imagine Sports.
It's a wonderful thing where you get to pick players throughout time and have leagues and such, and it's such a fun game to play. And what the community does is that after the tsunamis about 8 years ago, that hit Japan and areas over there. We started a league, and one of the guys donated one of the tobacco cards as the World Series winner for that league. And the cards were sent to me for safekeeping because I kind of started the league with this guy, and I donated 4 or 5 cards from the 50s. But boy, when that tobacco card came and I got to see it and hold it in my hand, first time ever.
Amazing.
Knowing I was just going to end up just giving it to somebody else.
Yeah, no kidding.
It is so cool. I mean, it's just like I went back to being a 9-year-old again. I'm just holding this card, and it was the most important thing in my universe for that 10 seconds was me holding that card.
Let's talk about left fielders. Now, this is going to be a great topic because I know what Barry has and I know what I have. So
yeah. So for left fielders, we've had this discussion, Dennis and I, is how do you take steroids into account when you're making these judgments? And you could either ignore them completely or kind of take them into some consideration. The battle between Barry Bonds and Ted Williams for best left fielder of all time is so close that it's hard to call, really. And even before Bonds obviously started with the steroids, he was still the best player in baseball. and his offensive numbers were still era comparison close to Ted Williams, but not nearly as much. But he was a much better fielder and a much better base runner. So I'm going to give Barry Bonds the benefit of the doubt that if he didn't start with steroids, that he may have continued to dominate in his own way and add the defense and base running and everything else. So I'm taking Barry Bonds, but I certainly would have no issue with anyone saying Ted Williams was the best left fielder of all time.
So as a manager, which is what I've been for over half my life in baseball, I would never start a baseball team with Barry Bonds. Athletically, no question, off the charts. Egotistically, just a terrible human being. Just plain and simple, terrible human being. Now, Ted Williams wasn't the greatest human being for the press and things like that as well, but Barry just didn't care about anybody but himself. And he let everyone know about it. So it really bothered me that when the story goes that Barry was in Las Vegas and Jose Canseco was there. This is before he wrote the book Juiced, which if anybody hasn't, if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't read the book Juiced, go online or go to your bookstore and buy it because it
even if you assume that Canseco was only telling the truth 70% of the time.
Exactly, half the time.
It tells a great story of the era.
Barry's in Las Vegas. The guys are all there for a home run hitting competition. Canseco wins. Bonds goes to him and says, like, how can you, after not being in professional baseball for 2 years, beat all of us? Canseco gives him the magic. Barry's ego says, I can be the greatest of all time if all I do is become a juice monkey on steroids. His head becomes almost twice the size that it was normally. It was so evident that guys like Bonds and McGuire became cartoon characters, not baseball players anymore. And I know, in a way, if you say they saved the game of baseball, I don't believe that, because the purest of baseball fans will always be there. I think generationally we pass that down to our kids and our grandchildren. It might have brought in a different segment of baseball fan and increased the popularity of baseball, but I don't even know if that's good, because all it does is increase salaries, which increase egos, which increase movement in the game. So I don't know. I have such a dark spot for Barry Bonds that I just can't have him on the list. And Ted Williams, well, Bill, and you probably agree to this, is probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, pure hitter of all time.
No, Babe Ruth is the greatest pure hitter of all time.
Where did Ty Cobb play? I thought he played left, not right.
He played center.
Center, yeah.
I thought, where did Sam Crawford play? I thought
Sam Crawford played right field.
Right field. I pick Ricky Henderson. And
Harry Heilman played right field as well. Crawford might have played left field.
I picked Ricky Henderson, and I knew that Barry would go with that direction of Bonds or Williams. And I wanted to add Ricky because Ricky was such a different – he changed the game of baseball. He put pressure on pitchers and teams. The Toronto Blue Jays in 1 year in '89 literally got destroyed by Ricky Henderson alone.
Ricky Henderson was, bar none, the best leadoff hitter in history. And Tim Raines was second. And we got to see both of them play. That's why I love baseball. We got to see the two best leadoff hitters.
But Ricky Henderson didn't know that he played with Olerud 3 times.
Well, I don't think we're talking. I mean, we're not. We're talking baseball ability.
The fact that Henderson said, "I played with a guy that had to wear a helmet all the time." He says, "Yeah, Ricky, that was me with Toronto."
Bill, what's your thought on it? I mean, we've got Bonds, we've got Williams, and Henderson.
I know. I thought Bonds was the greatest hitter of all time because Sam Holman made his bat.
You're not allowed to pick Warren Cromartie, by the way. You have to pick someone else.
No, Warren. When you shake Warren Cromartie's hand, make sure you check your fingers.
All right, let's move on to center field. Center field.
Center field. I love that. Yeah.
Center field. Again, this is one. I got Willie Mays.
So do I.
But Ty Cobb obviously is not a bad choice. I mean, I think it comes down to those two guys and maybe Trish Speaker from the early Red Sox.
What about Mickey Mantle?
And Mickey Mantle. Yeah, Mickey Mantle.
Yeah.
And Joe DiMaggio. I mean, the thing is, there were so many great center fielders because that's where great players played.
Yeah.
I mean, Duke Snider was the 3rd best center fielder in his city.
Isn't that funny?
In his career. I mean, that's just craziness. And Bill, I don't know how much you would remember this, but we grew up listening to Duke Snider and Dave Van Horn do the Expos games. And for my money...
Yes, they did. When I pitched, you know what Duke said? He said that Bill Lee, he doesn't play with a full deck, but the cards he plays really well.
Duke Snider... for my first 3 or 4 years of listening to him was awesome, but then he got to the point where every story I'd heard 5 times before. But Dave Van Horn was the best announcer in baseball. He was just awesome.
Buck Martinez?
Not Buck Martinez, no. Dave Van Horn was fantastic.
Buck Martinez and my dad were both telephone company guys, and Buck Martinez is probably one of the guys I had the hardest time getting out. All catchers I had trouble getting out.
Plus,
Munson, Martinez.
At some point in time, Buck only faced left-handed pitchers.
True.
and even then, his numbers weren't great, but he did a good job behind the plate, and he was a perfect platoon mate for Ernie Witt.
Right field. Let's go.
Right field. Well, I have Hank Aaron.
And I have Roberto Clemente, which is your second one.
But I have to say that the only reason I have Hank Aaron is because I put Babe Ruth to DH.
Right.
So I'm going to discuss both of them at the same time because it makes sense. Hank Aaron for obvious reasons. Roberto Clemente, I loved. He was an incredible defender, probably a better defensive player than Hank Aaron. You may know better than I about that, Bill. Certainly the arm was something special.
Oh, yeah.
Consistent 300 hitter, if not with home run power, lots of extra base power. He was just a great player. But Hank Aaron was Roberto Clemente with power. And the first half of Hank Aaron's career, he played in a stadium that reduced his home runs in Milwaukee. But then he was lucky enough to play in Atlanta the second half of his career. And the second half of his career, he played in a park that helped him. So it kind of balanced him out, almost as if he'd played in a neutral park his entire career. But he was just so good for so long, and plus he was one of the early black stars, and that brings with it an extra level of pressure that other players didn't have to deal with.
Oh, yeah, I know. You know why Atlanta is such a home run hitter's park?
Is it the elevation or? It's
the elevation.
Yeah. It almost always is.
It's the elevation and the humidity. The ball just jumps out of that park.
But Hank Aaron hit 40 home runs in his 20th season.
Yeah. And he was one of 3 guys on that team to hit 40 home runs.
Man.
Do you remember who the other 2?
Davy Johnson. No one gets Davy Johnson.
Davy Johnson was one of them. Who was the other one? I think he may have been playing third base at the time, but he eventually.
That was the guy that he played for the Milwaukee Braves too.
No, not.
What's his name?
No, we're talking. This is in the 70s when 3 guys hit 40 home runs. Darrell Evans.
Yeah, they did.
Darrell Evans.
Evans.
First base in Detroit.
Right.
Yeah. Then he went to Detroit when he was like 39 years old. He hit 40 home runs. He was one of the underrated players of your era because he could play. He could play really good defense at both third base and first base, and he had great power and a great eye. And that was kind of ahead of his time because now the big thing isn't batting average; it's power, on base percentage, and he did that in the 70s before it was the way to go.
You're exactly right. He was really underrated. Wow. Billy Buckner, too.
Billy Buckner.
And the thing people don't remember about Buckner, who saw him in my era, was when he was younger, he was a speed demon. He could run.
He wasn't in 86.
No, he wasn't. But he had so many injuries that it took away his speed.
That ankle, yeah.
But he could.
Him and Freddie Lynn.
He could hit and he could run.
Bill, talk about. We're talking outfielders right now. Talk about your
Frank Robinson.
Well, no,
Frank Robinson's got to be in
let's
there.
talk about your outfielders in 75. You got 2 rookies. You got Jimmy Rice, Freddie Lynn, and then you got Dewey Evans in right field. I mean, what an outfield to play in front of, right?
It kept Bernie Carbo on the bench all year.
Yeah, it kept everybody. Rick Miller was our backup. He was a great center fielder too.
He was
but
a great,
I'll tell you,
but
Rice,
he couldn't hit though.
As much as I don't like Rice as an announcer, and I don't like him. I never liked him before. And I always had trouble with Rice was the fact that he robbed Glenn Borgman, who was a catcher from Minnesota, and he went over the fence twice in Minnesota and robbed him of home runs. And Freddie Lynn robbed it. I ended up throwing I threw like a 14-hitter, won the ball game. I had nothing, and I had 3 home runs brought back into the park by Freddie Lynn and Jim Rice.
Yeah, but you like Freddie because he's a Cali guy, right?
I like Freddie because he's a Cali guy. Freddie's a sweetheart, you know.
Yeah, no.
His wife would have liked Boston.
How would his numbers have looked if he hadn't gotten injured? Would it be like a Pete Reiser thing? I mean, Pete Reiser was the same thing with the Dodgers in the 50s, right? Is that might have been
would have been a Hall of Famer first ballot.
No,
Freddie
absolutely.
Lynn would have lifetime 330 hitter.
So Bill, here's the thing. I mean, the one question I want to ask you is, out of all the players we're talking about tonight, who was your favorite teammate that you played with?
You can't answer Rodney Scott, though. You're not allowed
to. Rodney, I love Rodney. Wow. Rodney had the most amazing intuition and sense of humor, and never said a word. But and Andre Dawson. Andre Dawson was I looked up to Andre more than any ball player in my career.
Good choice.
Andre was on that table. He had his knees drained at least 7 times a year. He was on that Stems machine. He was on ice. The guy played on 2 of the worst knees I ever saw.
And the worst field turf. And he had to play on that stupid stadium and run around in center field on that garbage. Yeah. I mean, him going to Chicago, it probably made his Hall of Fame nomination. He had a great year.
Oh, for sure.
But he's remembered for that year in Chicago. But by far, if you took his best 6 seasons, they're all Montreal.
Oh, yeah.
He was just an amazing player.
Andre, my favorite teammate is Andre Dawson. The next favorite guy that I spent my time with was Jim Willoughby, the reliever, the Potawatomi Indian. He had really amazing insight, and I remember he's telling me about Carruthers, him, Jim Moffitt, all the giant pitchers are out all night. They're smoking weed. They're on a mountaintop outside of Tucson or something, and all of a sudden he's telling this story to the Buffalo Head gang, which is Wise, Willoughby, me, and Carbo and Jenkins.
Oh, the Buffalo Heads.
He's telling the story about the Buffalo Heads, he's saying, yeah, all of a sudden the sunrise started coming up and the glow, and there was a cloud, and I saw a G, perfect G, and then I saw an O, and I'm going, and he goes D, and then Wise goes, yeah, and the Indian on the other hill saw dog.
And Bill, he's almost exactly the same size as you. He's 6'2". At playing weight, he was 185.
He's to the right, though.
Yeah, he's right-handed, but I mean, size-wise, he's a pretty
Willow's
big guy.
California boy.
Yeah, California guy.
He's from Dinuba. He's a Central Valley.
They say he's from Salinas.
Bill, I'm certain.
No, he wasn't. He's from Dinuba or
Salinas.
There's a little town, Clovis. He's from Clovis, California.
Because they say he was born they say he was born in '49, and he was in Salinas, California. So
Salinas. He ain't from Salinas.
They could be incorrect. It's true.
Dennis, I mentioned Mickey Cochran earlier as my catcher.
Right. Yeah.
And I thought, Michael, could you drag up Mickey Cochran's baseball reference stuff? I believe
not Mickey Tettleton.
Not Mickey Tettleton. No.
Mickey Cochran is from Bridgewater, Massachusetts.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Bridgewater, and he went to Bridgewater High School.
Yes, sir.
He went to Bridgewater High School.
Yeah.
I played on his field. In fact, I almost threw a perfect game in slow pitch softball there.
How do you throw a perfect game in slow pitch softball? Oh, you must have had me in center field. If you had me in center field.
I had a Red Sox team behind me. I'm playing the fire department, and we're playing on 90-foot bases.
90-foot bases of softball.
You know what, Bill? You impressed me that you knew that he was from Bridgewater High School.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive,
Come on,
buddy.
Man, you're talking Billy.
Hey, Bill tried to catch me a few times and didn't. I tried to catch him, and I didn't catch him either. So
I know.
I played on his field, and I pissed on Jim Fanning field.
Yeah, you would have rather pissed on Jim Fanning, I'm sure. But
Mickey Cochran batted .320 lifetime batting average as a catcher, man.
If Mickey Cochran hadn't been hit, I think, in the head by a pitch when he was like 30, 31, 32 years old, we'd probably be talking about him as the best catcher of all time.
Wow.
Maybe not with Josh Gibson.
Yeah, pretty short career, yeah.
But he got hit by a pitch
12 years.
In Detroit or Philadelphia, and it pretty much ended his career.
I can't say Gibson numbers because, like, his power numbers weren't there. I mean,
no, but that's what I mean by earlier my comment. That it's
hard
hard to compare
Josh Gibson,
the Negro League players.
I
mean, you had a guy like Minnie Minoso, who started playing in the major leagues when he was in his mid-20s.
Yeah, Mickey got hit in the head in 37.
He's probably not going to be in the Hall of Fame, but if you took his numbers from his Negro Leagues and added them to his major leagues, people would look at those numbers and go, how is this guy not in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
Oh, you look at his numbers in the big leagues. They're unbelievable.
They are,
steals and everything else.
But only like 12 years, though, because he started when he was 24, 25 years old because he lost so much time. I remember the baseball card when I was a kid when he got a hit in his 50s and became the oldest player to ever get a hit in the major leagues. And, in fact, he had gotten hits in something like 5 or 6 consecutive decades in the major leagues.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, you're the oldest that ever hit in a professional game, right? You're the oldest player ever to have a hit in professional baseball.
And at bat.
And base hit and an RBI
right,
when
69.
I was 65 in that
65?
complete game.
65,
Yeah,
I
was 65, yeah.
But I think you were with Houston then, and didn't they tell you a fastball was coming? Wasn't that how it worked?
No, I actually hit against a guy who pitched with the California Angels, or the LA Angels, the year before.
Oh, which guy was that?
Sent down to the minor league. Yeah.
Do you remember his name, Bill?
Great game. No, it's I've got his jersey. In fact, in my closet, it was sent to me and autographed by him, and because I got the base hit off of him, and a friend of mine from Calgary, Alberta, got it from him, and then gave it to me.
Bill, it's unfortunate that if I'd thought about it or whatever, I might have gotten in contact with this gentleman and had him call into our show. But there's a friend of mine who was my very first baseball coach ever, who was a wonderful man, Rico McCackern.
Yeah, Rico, absolutely.
Oh, Rico! I played for Rico.
I know you did.
Absolutely.
And
next time we'll do that.
And Rico has mentioned many times that if I know that you're going to be around to let him know, because you were one of his favorite people ever, and he really enjoyed his time with you, and he'd love to get together with you again.
Oh, I love him, and I love his wife. His poor wife passed away early, and she was a saint.
When I was 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, Rico was my baseball coach in Little League. And the person who kept score on the bench every game was Susan. And this was before they even got married. They'd been together for years as a couple before they got married. And they finally got married, and she got sick. And she was, you're right, an absolutely wonderful person. She was one of my favorite people. She was just fantastic. So I'll just pass this on that Rico is one of your fans.
Yeah.
And he'd love to touch base with you again someday.
Well, there's some great.
I'll come up there.
There's some great baseball people across the country.
As soon as you open the border, I'll be up there.
We would love to have you
There's
here, man.
14 acres outside of Tatamagouche, and I'll buy it.
Attaboy.
Hey, Tatamagouche.
That's not far.
You even pronounced it right. That's
Tatamagouche.
well
There's
done.
a brewery. There's a brewery there that serves great beer and a railroad car. And
you know what this sounds like?
Put me in
the interview that you gave that my mother loved when you talked about living on the mountain with the beer and the river rolling beside you.
Listen, Bill is living in a mountain, right?
I live. I'm on the top of a ridge.
Yeah.
I'm overlooking Craftsbury Common. I can see the lights of Sherbrooke, Quebec on the distance.
Absolutely.
Isn't that amazing? And Montreal's over the other ridge.
So
all I do, I'm surrounded by Canada.
Bill,
I just can't touch it.
Bill, this is a question that you may choose not to answer, and I can understand why. Who do you think in your era was the most overrated superstar?
Oh, he'll tell you.
Overrated what?
Superstar. Or someone who was considered a superstar that really, you know what, wasn't as good as what people said.
Wow.
I have a choice.
That's a great.
But I don't know, because I might be completely wrong. But one guy I think of that when I just look at the numbers and such is Steve Garvey, who had great numbers.
Oh, my God. I wouldn't put him up as a superstar. He lost his wife to a piano player.
Okay. I didn't realize we judged our players on what musician they lost their wives to. But anyway, that was a player that I followed through as a kid, and he was always considered to be a star. He was self-promoting, and part of the self-promotion was that he and his wife had the perfect relationship.
Yeah.
They were both hot, and they were both perfect, and they loved each other. And
that's the worst relationship to have.
Then it turned out he was more like Wade Boggs than he was like Roger Staubach.
Yes. Yeah. You're right. I hit a base hit to beat Sutton. I beat Sutton 2-1. I think beat Sutton 2 consecutive starts. And I remember I drove in 2 runs. I'm at first base, and I just shaved, I think. And Garvey goes, Bill, I don't know if you look better with or without the beard. And I go, do you guys have soap on a rope in your clubhouse?
And Garvey was the guy that he would shave at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he'd have a beard at 10.
Yeah, he was a hairy guy.
So
they had a good ball team, though. I mean, Garvey and Ronnie Say.
Oh my God, it was all the system.
Donnie Sutton and Fernando came in the 80s.
But they brought up all these guys through the minor leaguers, like Albuquerque and their other.
The Dodgers have always been,
teams.
and look at the Dodgers now. I was talking to my father the other night. Yeah, Mookie Betts was brought in, traded in, but they had a lot of natural. These guys are young, right?
You knew the best player on Albuquerque was of the 3?
Buckner.
There were 3, 4. No, one Buckner. It was a guy from.
Bobby Valentine, maybe.
No, it wasn't him either. His name was Scott Harvey.
Yeah, that's a name I'm not familiar with, which I don't often say when I'm talking about baseball.
Scott Harvey is the guy who beat the Cubans. He's from
Pull him up, Mike.
Fredericton, New Brunswick.
Yeah, because I thought that in that era that Bobby Valentine, as much as the other guys like Ron Say and Garvey and Bill Russell and all that eventually became stars, that Bobby Valentine initially was considered to be the crown jewel, and he just got injured so much.
Yeah, he hurt his ankle and stuff like Buckner. Buckner and him were both at USC together. Scott Harvey played for what's his name? The Buzzard. Sanders.
Bill.
Scott Harvey Jr. we have hauled up on the screen right now.
Really?
Yeah, he played
right
professional
That would be his son.
baseball in the minor league. No, it's probably him.
It is.
He was probably Scott
It's
Harvey
probably
Jr.
him. He was. Yeah, I beat him. I beat him with a broken ankle from when I was pitching for Moncton.
He pitched against Team Cuba in 1976, and he lost 1-0 against Team Cuba
in Fredericton. In Fredericton.
And in fact, I think when we brought the Cuba tour to Fredericton a few years ago, that was mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. The guy hit something like 344 in Albuquerque and came home because he was homesick.
Yeah, he hit 552
in the senior league.
552.
You know what? It doesn't matter what league you're in. If you hit 552, you're doing
pretty
really
good.
well.
You're pretty good.
Yeah, I'm telling you, they must not have issued gloves in that league.
So, Bill, totally off topic, but I need to know the answer to this question because I know you're a basketball player and a basketball fan. Who is the best basketball player of all time?
Oh, wow. We're going into a whole new segment. We could take a long...
I'm unmuting my mic for this.
We're looking for a 2-minute answer on this one.
All right, go ahead, Bill.
The best basketball player of all time playing right now, LeBron James.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that.
Big guy.
At this point.
It is. I don't like him. I didn't like him when he was high school. I didn't like him when he got the Hummer, the car and stuff like that. And
but you love his basketball.
Oh my God, the guy is he's big. He's a guard. He's a freak, and everything.
Okay, so
he's Michael Jordan. If instead of being 6'6", he was 6'9".
I'd almost say he's more like he's Magic Johnson, but if he decided to work out,
he's Jordan and Johnson and Kobe combined.
He's Johnson's size and Jordan's skills, which is really stupid.
Yeah, it's not fair.
So
he's a big guy. Look at his shoulders. Look at how he can go into the post and do everything and shoot from threes and stuff. My favorite basketball player of all time is Bill Russell.
Oh, 100%.
But he might even be the answer to the best player of all time.
He's got the most rings, but I watched a very good video on it recently of him and all the other candidates for best player of all time, and just not saying it was a bad era to play in, it was just a different era. So I'm thinking,
it's definitely a different era, Michael. You got that bang on, and essentially it comes down to Russell and Chamberlain, and really Chamberlain is probably the most physically talented basketball player ever.
Yeah,
but Russell was the best winner and leader of that era.
Oh, yeah.
And LeBron is very similar to Russell. He drags teammates with him.
All right, guys, here's the thing. I'm the host of this show. I'm not going to lie to you, and we're talking baseball tonight. We want to do a basketball show one night. We can do a basketball show, but we're doing baseball, all right? It's just
I just thought
I'm going to segue into that because the last choice is really who's the greatest baseball player in the history of baseball, because
Babe Ruth.
Yeah, because if you pick a DH,
Babe Ruth. Let's not even talk about it. I mean, let's pretend that he never pitched. Let's pretend that he wasn't one of the best left-handed pitchers in baseball for his first 5 years.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's no choice. And I get the question all the time: who's the best leadoff hitter ever? If you want to have someone lead off, Babe Ruth. Who's the best number 2 hitter? Babe Ruth. How about number 3? Babe Ruth. I mean, it just doesn't change. He was the best hitter ever.
Okay, so that's your list tonight. So the bottom line is that if you're online tonight and you've watched this podcast for almost 2 hours, I want to remind you to go online, whether it's on Facebook, it's on our YouTube channel, Spotify, and post your selections and your choices of the greatest players of all time. I have thoroughly enjoyed these last 2 hours, and I am sure that we'll have Barry and Bill back many times throughout the next few months to talk about subjects. We've already segued into basketball already, so I just want to thank Bill from the bottom of my heart and Barry as well to be here tonight because it's a special time. I love the game. I want the game to go in the right direction. We've had the most unbelievably difficult time watching baseball with no fans in the stands, and I know how many people that are going to watch this podcast and listen to this podcast that love the game like we do, and we just want the game to grow and certainly prosper, and we're looking forward to the new normal so we can get back to the game that we all love.
Yes, we love this game. Thank you for having me, and go play with your grandchildren, and don't worry about it, and let's get rid of Manfred commissioner.
Yeah. And listen, go online once again to Amazon and check out Bill's new book. It is, he has such an incredible stories from behind the scenes of baseball, and he's the most well-read person I've ever met in the game as a professional player. And when you can rival Barry in regards to baseball knowledge, that tells you something right there. So two of the best on the planet when it comes to baseball knowledge tonight here on the weekly Woodcast with Dennis and Michael Woodworth. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time right here.
Love you guys.
Nova Scotia,
Bye-bye.
Canada.
See you, Bill. Nice
Love you
having
too,
you.
Bill.